Hello and welcome to episode 48 of the Tales of Sigmar podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chalmers, and tonight I'm joined by a special guest. And who is it?
It is myself, Andy Currie.
Andy Currie, and he is the Scottish Six Nations team captain. And we're going to be chatting all things Six Nations in this episode. Now, you might not be aware of it, so Andy, do you want to kind of explain what is the Six Nations?
Of course, so the Six Nations came about off the back of what used to happen around about the ETC. So back in 8th edition of Warhammer, we had teams from all over the UK and the world flying out to ETC events, and off the back of that there was also a Six Nations event where we had various countries, UK based, and also some of the European countries that were swapping in and out for the Six Nations event. But with the move to AOS in 2015, that kind of died off. So in 2017, Ben Currie reached out and we put together what was the inaugural AOS Six Nations down in Derby. And from there, it's kicked on every year, apart from 2020, obviously, with the COVID impact. So what we've got is we've got teams from Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, Ireland, and Scandinavia. So it's they all grouped together, and each country takes a turn to host. So as I said, 2017 was Derby, 2018 was Scotland, so it came up to us, and 2019 was Wales. Cool. 2020 was supposed to be Northern Ireland, but unfortunately they will not be able to do that with the COVID restrictions.
Right, and 2021, so that's actually going ahead this year, isn't it?
That's right, so we've all committed, so we've got 6 teams committed. Again, COVID restrictions dependent, but we have penciled in I'm going to say that the 6th and 7th of November down in Firestorm Games in Wales this year.
That's cool. So was there a reason you kind of all decided to host it down in Wales? Was it more because of COVID rather than hosting it in whichever country was meant to be doing it?
Yeah, so I mean, once we had decided it was going to happen again, Scotland had said we would attempt to host, and we went away and did all the research, and we're pretty limited with venue space up here in Scotland. We've got Common Ground Games, we've got Tabletop Games up in Aberdeen, and we've got a couple of other venues sort of starting to spring up now. But in reality, if you're looking for your central gaming venue, it's Common Ground Games. And with the COVID restrictions, they just couldn't accommodate all the teams, the coaches, in a safe manner, or at least I think a comfortable manner. So we reached out to the group. You know, we've got a fantastic community of Six Nations captains, former captains, coaches, and we put our heads together, and Wales stepped up and said, look, we're happy to come forward and host this year. So they've got Firestorm Games down there in Cardiff, so they'll be hosting this year.
Oh, excellent. And you kind of touched on it there. You kind of talked about kind of the captain, coach, and team members. So how many people kind of do participate in this?
Yep, so you've got 8 people in a team. So you've got each team will normally have a captain and vice captain with sort of set roles, and then each team can also have a non-playing coach with them. Again, that's a sort of carryover from the ETC years where each team would have a coach, and they would kind of be the runner. ETC obviously had the Swedish scoring system, with the variability, and each team was trying to get capped as it was, which still carries over onto this. And the coach helps to liaise between each of the tables. You know, how's your game going? The captain's maybe told the person to push, or maybe told that person to rein it back in and go for a sort of draw, minor loss if possible.
Sure.
So they're sort of go between in all the tables. But I think it's much more social now, or at least it was in 2017, the last time I was there. So we had the team of 8 and the non-playing coach. But you can have a non-playing captain. England this year have got a non-playing captain. And 8 of the best players taking part.
Okay, so can the coaches kind of help people play, not help them play through the game, but if they can see an opening or something, they can kind of point it out on the table, or is it more kind
No,
of...
it's not so much coaching on the table as coaching the individual. Like if the person is maybe having a bad run of luck, it's picking them up. It's saying, look, don't worry about it. Everyone else is doing well. They wouldn't directly step in and play a game. You wouldn't want somebody backseating in a game, especially between two countries. And it's always done in a good spirit, but it's very competitive. So having that person off the table making comments on what he should and shouldn't do wouldn't go down too well. So it's definitely more of a morale thing.
Oh, okay, that's cool. And when you kind of do your team selection, how do you kind of pick teammates? Do you kind of do you have a kind of common pool that you pick from, or do you open it up for people to apply? Or
Scotland's really we're blessed with the northern rankings, which gives us a basis of selections. So we can go through that and we can say, top 24. Take that as your starting point and start reaching out to folk. And I mean, what we've got to remember is that it's a financial commitment to joining the team.
Yeah.
You've got travel. It could be any, it could be any of the UK countries. It could be one of the Scandinavian countries. So you're talking quite a financial outlay plus armies if you decide to pick up a new army. So we will reach out to folk and say, look, are you interested? We'll kind of give them an update on what costs will look like based on previous years, give them the dates, and they'll go away usually and check and see if that works. So that kind of cuts down the long list to a short list.
Sure.
And then at that point, again, JP, one of the members of the Northern Invasion podcast, and you'll have seen him on the Warhammer community website as well, talking about his list spot. He gave us an ELO system, so basically he has analysed the games that people in Scotland have played, and can extrapolate an ELO system based on how these people perform against each other, and that helps us to then pin it down to say, right, we've got these people in the first 8 positions, wherever they may be in the rankings. So first of all, you've got the volunteers. So if you say you had 14 volunteers, and then we can say, right, up to this point, you'll have a chance to affect your ranking as such by attending events when we had events.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that, the captain, vice captain, and coach can select the team. We have done it on a committee basis before, where people would apply and put in the reasons why they think they should be selected for the team and their experiences and so on. But with this year, with the COVID restrictions and the impact, it's been a bit more of a dictatorship, and that I haven't had the luxury of the time or the quantity of games and events to allow us to reach out into that pool. So we've just taken it from the last set of rankings we had, that ELO system that JP put together, and that's helped us to select 8 people who are willing to put in the time and who have got a proven track record on the table.
Yeah. It's quite interesting seeing how in-depth it does get to kind of picking those players. Because sometimes you see like some of the other countries where it's literally like, if you want to take part, send us an email and then we'll consider it.
We were the same. 2017, it was a case of folks chucking them into the hat. Let's hope we can get 8 folk and jump in a bus and off we go down south. It's only as the event builds and as the prestige of wanting to play for your country grows and that everyone gets, everyone wants to jump back in. And that's when you have the luxury of tapping into these resources, the community resources that we've got, to try and build the best team that you can get.
100%, yeah. Having JP and Liftspot there is definitely a bonus. I think that some of the other teams probably wished that they had. So obviously you've talked about kind of COVID and that. When it comes to practice, how do you practice? And especially, I suppose this year is even tougher because with all the COVID restrictions, how do you practice for anything like this?
So we take a normal year, a year where we're not restricted by COVID, then you would have multiple practice days in which you can invite the team along with the extended community of persons who are interested. Because there is a certain element of, as I said earlier on, competitiveness that comes with playing with the Six Nations team. The expectation is that you are on your game, you know your army inside out, you know the scenarios inside out, and that only comes from practice. So by having these practice days, we get a chance to invite the team and interested parties to come together and get as many practice games in as possible. So that would be a venue perhaps, and again, we had planned to do these regionally. So up north in Aberdeen, Central Belt, try and give as many people a chance to join in as possible. And it also gives the team a chance to play different people in different armies. That's an ideal scenario. And then on those days, you might split everyone up. You might actually give people a chance to learn about the pairing system that I'm sure we'll go on to later on. And it gives everyone a chance to understand how things work. But what we really want to try and get to a point is where people can start to learn that the game is finished. Rather than playing out these 5 turns, it's to say, right, I've lost the major. Where did I go wrong? Let's re-rack and see if I can do something different. And it's trying to get into those repetitions of the first 2 turns where the major decisions are going to impact the game the most. We can all eke out those results. Turns 3, 4, and 5. Everyone is capable of picking up secondaries, of starting to claw back some points. But the major decisions you make in turn 1 and turn 2, and your deployment to an extent, are what's going to change the outcome of that game. So get as many reps in as we can.
Yeah, you need to get that scalpel out straight away to be able to go, right, how do you get that very kind of strategic, straight to the point, this is how I'm going to win this game, turn 1, turn 2.
Exactly. And then if I take, for instance, like my army, Fire Slayers, you learn how to deploy that army to maximise your buffs, to get your bubbles over, to make sure that you can move forward and take over the board. And that becomes pretty standard, regardless of the mission that you're playing. And once you learn that, then you can start to, change what you do depending on the army you're playing. But you've always got that fallback of, this is my default. I know from here I've got a X percentage chance of impacting the game in such a way.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's experience. That's all you're looking for.
I'm assuming with obviously AOS 3 coming out in the coming weeks, then that means that actually practice needs to be almost tripled just to kind of properly narrow down all the new rules, new table size,
without doubt,
everything.
I think if the team haven't guessed yet, there's going to be a lot of practice days. There's going to be a lot of expectation, whether it be, and I guess just to touch on the reality of the situation, these practice days are limited. Each country's got its own restrictions, and your hope is that you can get everyone together, but that might not be possible. So what we'll probably end up having is groups of people practicing in their own local areas, hosting Garden Hammer, maybe getting some common ground days where and when we can. But if you can't get to these practice days, then you move to your fallback, and that's where we would have wanted to be practicing through lockdown. If we had a date in mind, but we didn't, so we used something called Tabletop Simulator, and that gives us a chance to play online, to roll some dice, move the models, get an appreciation for what your armies can do, but it doesn't really match, models on the table and rolling dice in your hand.
No, I played a bit of TTS over lockdown, but going back to actual proper physical games like the last couple of weeks it's kind of a chalk and cheese between the two.
Without doubt.
Yeah, it kind of gave you that little bit of a fix that you needed, but it's not the proper stuff. So
exactly,
it's
it scratched the itch, but it's not
not the same.
It really is. You see all the people posting pictures on Twitter, and there's a joy there. There's a joy seeing everyone getting back to it, and it's something I hope to be able to do soon, especially with the team.
Definitely. With practicing, when new armies come out, do you do practice days specifically for that, so you know what those armies do? And do you have to find people who have the army, or do you proxy it, or?
I wouldn't say that we as a team have specifically focused on armies. I mean, I have got some big-brained people in this team. Nathan, who you've had on previously,
Yep.
I like to him and JP. I like to say that they're tapped into the matrix. They soak up the WhatsApp chats. They think about games. Just what armies can do. They look for the combos. So what you do is you try and spread out that across the team, and you try and make sure that people who do live and breathe and have the time, because not everyone's got the same time to do that. spread that into the team and share that knowledge. And where you do get opportunities to practice, so if there is something obviously broken or filthy or a must-take army that you expect to see in every game, in every team, then yes, you will either proxy or pick it up so that the team can practice with it.
Sure. So, talking about kind of picking up lists and things, do you specifically set lists for each specific team member, or do you kind of base it on what people have, or do you actually say, look, we need to get this army and we need to kind of, someone's got to buy it and paint it, people have, and then kind of divvy them out, or do you have a list of specifically, right, we need someone who has KO, we need someone who's got Fire Slayers, we need Beast Claw Raiders, for example, or Sons of Behemat, or whichever, and then do you kind of almost almost have a community group of armies and then split them out like that?
So when we do the selection of the team, we'll spreadsheet it. We'll spreadsheet it out and say, right, guys, user in the team, what have we got, and then we'll start pulling the armies together. And then you start meta watching. So you'll be checking out Twitter for tournament results. You'll be looking to Listbot to see what's starting to rise to the top, and you'll have a good idea of what armies you want to be taken. Now, what we've got to remember is that for Six Nations, there was, and to my knowledge still is, a restriction on duplication of armies. So you couldn't take 2 Fireslayer armies, you couldn't take 2 KO lists, because only one army can have that war scroll.
Sure.
So that stops that spam of 8 lists that are all the same. So there used to be or the requirement was you had to have one of each alliance. So order, chaos, destruction, death, and you're meant to have one from each of those. And in each of those, you had no repetition of war scrolls. Now, there's plenty of armies out there, and that gave us plenty of choice to work with. But it also keeps it from, and you do see some repetition across the teams, but inside the team, there's no repetition.
Sure.
So that impacts you as well when you are choosing what armies to take with you. So you're going to have an Idenith list. You're going to have a KO list. You're probably going to have a Fireslay list. And then you've got to say, right, well, if I can only have 2 order lists, what one's going to drop out? And that's, again, much like the actual picking of the person who's coming to the tournament. That's when you start shortlisting your armies and saying, right, what one fits. And then I suppose it also starts getting complicated, James, because then you start saying, what scenarios are we going to look at, and what armies do well in what scenarios. And then you start saying, do we want to start selecting an army that we know does really well in all these hero missions because it's got 6 heroes that are strong, and for instance, like the Sons of Behemoth, or do we want to have a horde army that can push out and just swarm the table? We know it hits hard and it's complete utter board control. Yeah. And then even in those scenarios where they don't have many heroes, they can control the objectives and stop the heroes from getting there.
Do you find out like what the missions are beforehand, or do you have to plan for like every potential mission?
You've got to plan for every mission. So in 2017, and again, what we're doing this year is, once we do have those army choices locked in, because you want to lock those in as early as possible, so people can start getting those repetitions in, is that you then have, as people start to get their repetitions in against the various armies that they're likely to see at Six Nations, they start to build an idea in their head of, good, okay, no, that's a really bad matchup for me.
Yeah.
And then what we ask the people to do is look at each scenario and say, if I'm playing a good matchup army in this scenario, then I am likely to win. And we can start to build a matrix. And from that, we can start to then say, okay, the KO list is going to be good against X, Y, and Z. And if we get these scenarios, we can start to try and engineer the matchups. Because at Six Nations, what happens is, when you get to a table, you have scenarios that are rolled there and then. And you then have your 8 armies to pick from. But what you do is you put up 2 cards, and the other team does the same, and that's the matchup process. So you have this back and forward where you basically get to veto one list. So if I put down like the KO list, and say for instance a Stormcast Liberator spam army.
Yeah.
They might say, "Oh, we don't fancy playing the KO list, so we'll take the Stormcast army." But we might know that both those armies do well on that mission. So we've tried to engineer a situation with practice and prep, so that the armies we put down, regardless, give us the best opportunity against the armies we might expect to see.
Okay. Do you all play the same mission at the same time then, or could you potentially have all of your teammates all playing completely different missions, and then you've got to kind of tailor the pairings like that?
Yes. So what it used to be is, because the way you put down the cards is that you end up with pairs. So you'll have 2 armies from each group playing that mission. So you end up with 4 different scenarios being played in your pairs, if you think about it. So if you've got 8 players in your team, you put your cards down in pairs against the opponent's team, and that's for a specific scenario. So once both those cards have been played out, then you'd go into the next scenario, and then that next 2 would play a different scenario, and so on, until you end up with what is basically 4 rows of tables with 4 people on each row playing that scenario.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it all comes back to that pairing process. So you'd roll the dice and you'd say, right, these 2 are up for selection. Okay, then these 2 armies will be playing that mission, or they're coming back into the hand and getting moved on to later on.
Okay, that's cool. Do you, when you kind of pick your lists, you kind of talked about like what the meta is and that. Do you try and sometimes think of almost left field lists that counter what the meta is, or do you kind of go with tried and tested list, like you said, and kind of that you all have a Fire Slayer list, you have an IDNF list, a KO list, for example.
Yeah.
Do you kind of have that? Obviously, IDNF kind of counters shooting quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Fire Slayers, like you said, it's more about board control and having big blocks of troops that don't die. Do you kind of also think, well, actually, what are kind of counters to the niche versions of the meta?
Without doubt, and I think, I am not clever enough, nor am I in depth enough on the cutting edge meta to do so. But we have people in the team who are, the people who live and breathe it, who have the insights, who see these angles, as it was. And if they bring it to the table and they think it's well founded, then by all means we will explore it. Because what you've got to weigh up against though is that, as you say, that known quantity. Does this army that they bring forward, does it cover enough angles, or can we engineer enough solutions to make it viable? Like, there's no point in bringing it, like for instance, I'll give you an example. When Gristlegore was the thing, I took a KO list to Warhammer World for the Grand Tournament, with the expectation being that I would high percentage chance hit a Gristlegore army and be able to shoot it off the board with Barracks Elfin from the old rule set. But the reality is you're still dependent on meeting that matchup for that to work.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. So that whole weekend I didn't play Gristlegore. So I took an army with a view to chasing the meta and trying to beat it. But if you don't get that matchup, then you're sliding down the tables and you're staring, a 5-0 loss. An 0-5 weekend right in the face.
Yeah. So yeah, it's getting that balance between the two, that you don't want to sacrifice something that's like S tier with something that's has a kind of a kind of.
I think also it comes back to the individual as well. You could have somebody who doesn't play an S tier list, but has played 200-300 repetitions with that army or with a specific list.
Yeah.
And nothing trumps experience, because they'll have had that game where they've rolled hot. They'll have had that game where they rolled poor, and they'll know how to pivot. They'll know how to recover, or they'll know how to capitalise on a hot run. So that's you can have that. If you have that in your team, I think you're already onto a winner before you get to the table. regardless of
Yeah.
if it's a meta beta or a meta list.
Definitely. Yeah, I've had that conversation with Ian Spink, who has obviously played hundreds of games with Bone
Yeah,
Splitters. And he basically says, yeah, if I go to a table and I'm facing an army, I know exactly what I can and can't do against it, and like what I need to do to win.
yeah,
And like you said, like something like that where you've played hundreds of games with that same list is kind of invaluable. Um, yeah, if you give someone that's what we always say, if you give someone a net list, if they don't know how to use it, then yeah,
exactly.
you may as
Yeah,
well give
that
them a piece of chaos. It's
there's been examples of last second decisions to take net lists, and it doesn't always pay off, because you are then a slave to a list that everyone knows, because everyone's looking out for it. If they see it coming, well, that I know that net list. I've heard this podcast talk about it. I've seen that YouTube video break it down, and all of a sudden, regardless of how great that list is, everyone knows about it. But as you say, for Ian, bringing Bone Splitters, everyone's got a rough idea what they do, but those nuances that he learns from the repetitions make a massive difference.
definitely. So with the drawing process, do you sometimes almost not throw someone under the bus per se, but do you kind of, when you're doing the pairings and as a team, do you kind of go, well, actually, we would rather this person pairs off with that person, but it does mean that we're gonna like get a loss over here because that's the only other outcome.
Yeah, without doubt. There's always someone has to go under the bus. You can go over to them, give them the pat in the back, and say, "Yeah, sorry about this. You're going to have to take one for the team here." And sometimes, unfortunately, it can be the full weekend that person has to take one for the team. But that's the reality of team events. You're not playing for yourself. You're playing for the body.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to take those losses to take out the army that nobody wants to play. I mean, England did exactly that. Tom Maudsley got thrown under the bus with me in 2017. I was rocking the KO list, chemists, everyone coming out the clown car. It was finishing games ridiculously quickly because it was so broken. And he had the Blake King list. Straight away, the guys just went, "Yep, you're playing Tom." And he said, "Oh, under the bus." And it took me out of the equation, and it meant the lists that they were confident with didn't run up against that, and it took me out of the equation. And eventually we did draw that round, but that again comes down to the pairing process. They knew to take me out of the game by feeding me Tom, basically.
Yeah. Do you sometimes kind of say when that happens, like to the person who is being kind of thrown under the bus, do you say, look, just try and get 1 or 2 points here or there?
Oh, definitely. And it becomes a different game for them because I've never experienced it myself. I've always been fortuitous enough to be the person telling someone that you're going under the bus. But you try and spin it. You try and put a positive on it for them. It's like, right, here's your challenge now. Can you get all your secondaries? Can you get the 4 points available from secondaries? Can you deny them their 2, i.e. can you retain enough of your points? Can you get enough secondary points to make their major not as impactful as they would have hoped from getting what they see as a positive matchup? So they might have thought this is a 20-0, and all of a sudden you've managed to claw that back to a 14-6 by virtue of the fact that you have played a blinder on your secondaries. You've managed to conserve your army. You've managed to, make massive damage to theirs for whatever reason. But as you say, even 1 or 2 points is a contribution to the team. We might have written that off as a 20-0 and said, yep, that one's not going to be, there's nothing coming from that table. And if they win, amazing. What a turn of luck. Something's went out well there. They've done fantastic. But if they come back to the captain's table and say, yeah, I got 2 points out of that game, brilliant. That's better than we expected.
Yeah. And how do the secondaries work? Do you have to is it like a normal event where you kind of submit your kind of list of secondaries that you want to do, or is it more...
Still up in the air just now. No decisions been made. The pack's still been formed for that. So, and obviously with AOS 3, there's going to be an impact. But from my understanding of previous years, it was almost a veto system. So it was like you put out You put out three, and the ours that put out two, and they could cancel one, so you're not getting that.
Right.
And then basically it was like trying to prevent you from doing the easy ones for you, and that became a mini game in itself. Because you're both opponents are sitting going, right, well, I've got a small pool that I can use the whole weekend. All right, I've potentially used this one already, so I've got this for this game. And you're not going to get that one. Like the one where you could, for instance, like Idneth, who could come on from the side in the opponent's back in the deployment zone, and then next turn step off, and they've got a secondary you couldn't stop because they were behind you the whole time. So you're obviously going to take that off the board, so they don't get that.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I quite like the secondaries like that, and I always like them in events. You can almost calling people's bluff of here's three, get rid of one.
Yes.
And
yeah.
you normally put out one of the easy ones because actually I can score that one by doing this. I used to do it with my Gloomspite with exactly that, with the hero going off the board, and I used to just hand a Gork a little shaman to like the opposite corner of the table and just go, yep, I'm off. And he's like, oh, okay. I didn't see that. It's always kind of a little a mini game. So I hope that they kind of stick around for AOS 3. I'm sure they will, but I expect with the new table sizes, etc., it will kind of be a bit different and probably be shaken up quite a bit.
I think there's going to be an in-depth conversation had in the organisation chat about what we want to do. I mean, in 2018, AOS 2 dropped 2 weeks before the event, and they took the decision to run with it, to keep to play AOS 2. Now, you might have saw that the Worlds, so the World Championships, have selected not to play AOS 3.
Okay.
They're going to stick with AOS 2. I would like to think that with potentially 3 months, if not 4 months, time between release and the event, that we'll make the decision to go for it, and we'll get a chance to see AOS 3, hopefully post FAQ, played to the highest caliber.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't. Like I said, with it being so far in the future, it's something that kind of a few of us in the club chat was saying about things like Lost and the Damned. We're hoping that AOS 3 is out before that. At the end of when's that? End of July, start of August.
Yes.
Because we don't want to feel like AOS 3's come out, but we're there stuck playing like an old game, if that makes sense. It's
I don't think for those events it'll be a very hard decision for the TO.
Yeah.
I think then you just have to enter into that social contract. We're all in the same boat.
We're all learning.
Yeah, we're all learning as we go. Let's not rip the arse out of it here. Okay, we might end up with some anomalies. The grots that do ridiculous amounts of damage or roll crazy amounts of attacks, but let's at least use this as an opportunity to feed back to GW and get that FAQ'd nice and sharp, so that we don't have this running rampant for too long.
Yeah, definitely. So you talked about the scoring. How does it work kind of overall? So obviously each game's a 20-0 like a normal event. But how does it work in a kind of team atmosphere? Is it a kind of specific, literally take all the scores, or do you have a kind of capped limit of what the points you can get per turn?
No, there's a cap, and the year that I played, it was 100 points, and the minimum you could score was, I'm going to get this wrong, I want to say 80. So it's quite a narrow band. And again, I'll come back to you. You can always put it in the show notes if I'm way out in that one. But what you end up with is a scenario where you don't have one team running away with it. So, for instance, if you did have that situation that you talked about earlier on, where the country had struggled to get people together, and it basically brought 8 people who were willing to travel and play, and you had another country who had 8 people who had played 200 games, prepped out their skin, and they came up against each other, and all of a sudden you end up with 8 majors.
Yeah,
that blows the tournament wide open. That blows the tournament, and then nobody else really has a chance, because then everyone has to beat that team 8-0, and the likelihood of that happening again is difficult.
Highly unlikely.
Exactly. So you put these caps in place to keep it interesting throughout, and you hope that you come to a situation where if you draw against each other, if you end up with 80 points each or somewhere in that region, you have that shades of grey towards the end of the tournament, where going into that last round, everyone's got a good idea of who's still in the play, who's got a chance, and you're not punished for having a really bad round. So as you have a team, if you have go into like the first round and do fantastic, and go into your second game and get absolutely destroyed, you're still in the game. You've still got an opportunity to recover going into that next round.
Yeah. No, that's cool, because, like you said, the last thing you want is someone to just game one, win 100 points, and then just go, yeah, no, that's fine. And everyone's just like, well, yeah, okay, they've won. Barring a kind of like miracle. Like I've done one team event before, and it was in 40k, and I mean, I didn't really know what was going on. It was just me and a few mates that like went, oh yeah, do you want to sign up? But it was, yeah, it's completely different kettle of fish, I found, to a normal event. Because, like you said, you've got those kind of score limits. It's not just you; it's actually the whole team that's working together. So, like normal events, you're always just kind of not just focus on yourself, because obviously you want to know how your mates are doing, but you are kind of going, right, I need to do the best I possibly can. But in a team event, you're actually like properly, how are you getting on, and like what's happening, and like you kind of think, oh, if they can get that few points there, then that kind of helps us over here, or anything like that. And yeah,
Exactly.
I loved it. It was a kind of completely different way of playing almost.
It's so unique, and I would say to anyone, if you get an opportunity to join in with these team events, please do so, because we talked about the matching process. That becomes a game in itself. So in 2017, and I'm sorry, this is my only kind of experience to draw on, is that we actually gave each other 15-20 minutes prior to the game starting for this matchup process, because it is so key to the round. And what we did is we went and made up cards with each person's face and their army, all kind of army related, sort of Magic the Gathering style. Got them all laminated, and we had them to put down, like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh style, slam them down. There's the two you're playing this round. And everyone gathers round, and you have your captain, vice captain, your captain, and your statistician sitting next to you with maybe like some matrices going, right, well we're good against that, or we think this army will be good against that one, and then everyone's kind of leaning over their shoulder, expecting to see who they get next round, and it's exciting. It's fun. There's a bit of banter back and forward. The friendly abuse, to say the least. You put that down. I wouldn't have done that. Just try and get the atmosphere
Proper
going.
mind games, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, get into them before you even roll any dice. But then when you get to the table, everyone's buzzing, because you've had that little bit of camaraderie between the two teams, and everyone's, it almost settles the nerves as well, because you've had that back and forward, and it's like, okay, that's out the way. Let's go roll some dice now and just have a good time.
Yeah, definitely. Do you play every country like in the kind of weekend?
Yeah, so you play each country once, and obviously there's 8 games in that round as it is. So a complete round robin, and regardless of how you're doing. So you could play. So for instance, we played England round 2. So you're in for a hard round there, and then you go into other rounds not knowing what you're expected to face. So for instance, Wales, they were struggling to get a team together. They had a few sort of what's the right word? They had some late additions step in to help them out. Maybe not the cutting edge of their nation's playing ability. So they did have. That was maybe an easier round for Scotland that time in 2017. Now every year since, they've absolutely smashed face. They've taken that as that was our starting point, and from there we've built. So you don't know what you're going to get in each round, but you do know that you're going to get some hard games regardless.
Yeah. So it's not kind of you're paired against like in positionings like you would in a normal event. It's literally like, right, okay, we're playing like this time, we're playing this country this time, this country this time, regardless of kind of where the positions are throughout the weekend.
That's right. Yeah, it's that across the weekend you have to play all of the other teams, and that if you want to win that event, you're going to have to do well in each of those rounds.
Yeah. Do you find So a lot of the UK team are obviously kind of GW playtesters and things like that. Do you find that they have not an advantage, but they kind of have, well, potentially a bit of an advantage because they've kind of like place tested some of the newer armies and things like that?
They may well have an advantage, and you could sit and lament about the fact that people get to play test and they get to see rules in advance, but the reality is, when they're playtesting, I believe it's a very narrow window they see. They don't see the full picture. They might have advantage of some repetition again, as we talked about earlier on. They can get some early games in, but I would just say that when you get to Six Nations, you want to play the best.
Yeah.
And if they've got that little step up, all the better. That's an extra chance for me to test myself because they've had a bit of extra time. Ultimately, it's a dice game, so you don't know what's going to happen on that table. You can do as much prep as you want. You can do everything you can. But if you make that 12-inch charge turn one, or if you fail that battle shock test, or you roll that one to get those 10 pink horrors back, then that could change the game, and no amount of play test and practice is going to change that.
100%. So it's definitely sounds awesome. Like it's definitely a thing that's kind of, I think in previous years it's always been kind of hyped up for the weekend in the week ahead, but that's kind of about it because there's never, unless I'm wrong, but there's never really been any kind of like streaming coverage for it. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, 2018 was the first year they had or 2019. So I'm getting my years wrong. So 2019, I think, was the first year they had streaming coverage. When Mr. Symes went down and set up and streamed, and that went down really well. I think as an insight to what was going on, and it gave everyone a chance to understand just exactly what Six Nations was. So I would hope that this year we'll see that again. But that's down to the Wales organisers, so it's not specifically the team who are going to be organising the event. It's a Wales TO.
Right. Okay.
We hope that he'll step forward and reach out and hopefully get that streaming presence in place.
Yeah, it's definitely because, like you said, it's some of the best players in, well, I suppose in the UK.
Without doubt.
Playing, so being able to actually watch them play on the tabletop is, I think, is definitely a valuable thing for people wanting to kind of pick up new tactics. And
I think we're seeing with the T Sports just now, the
Yes.
T Sports is going down fantastic. It's a great idea, and it's going down really well across all the sort of social media that I've seen. It's exciting, and all you're doing there, that's sort of like, say that's the Champions League, all right? But what we're talking about here is the Euros, the World Cup. It's a representation of your country, and not to kind of ham it up or anything like that, but there is a certain element of pride of pulling on your Scotland top or your Wales top, your England top, and saying I'm playing for my country, and off we go. And if the streaming can capture that and get that across to everyone who's watching, all the better, because it just gives them a chance to share in the atmosphere that will be there on the weekend.
100%. Now, before we get out of here, AOS 3 Dominion box set was obviously revealed on Saturday.
Yes.
Did you get to watch the stream, or did you kind of catch up on it on the community site?
So I caught up. So I was socialising in York that weekend, so I didn't get a chance to catch it live. But the next morning, after the fog had cleared, I had a chance to review the release. Got to say, I was blown away. It's fantastic to see the company matching what they did with 40k with AOS with this large box set release. Now, I did put out a wee tweet saying, like, I really hope we get plenty of stock and a banging rule set. But if you look at each of those models, you can see an advancement from 6 years ago now, since AOS 1 came out. The leaps and bounds in 3D technology, the injection molding for the plastics, it's fantastic. And the fact, I think if you look at 40k, the impact to the smaller table, I haven't heard any negatives. So I look forward to seeing that getting brought to AOS and seeing the impact that has.
100%, yeah. That's kind of the biggest thing for me, is seeing that smaller table and seeing exactly what that does for certain armies, and how it kind of changes how we play.
Yeah.
The little kind of rules teaser video that they did, with I loved it. I know it's had a bit of stick from on Twitter, but I absolutely loved it. It was
Got to embrace the cheese, surely.
exactly cheesy, tongue in cheek, but actually like talking about the rules, they sound really good.
Yeah.
Like
What was your favourite model?
the Night Vexler, the big
Oh
banner
yeah.
bearer. Like yeah, I'm a big fan of standard battle standard bearers from Fantasy Days. So yeah, that model is just absolutely stunning. What about yours?
Oh, the killer boss on the, is it the Nash Tooth?
Oh, the
Uh,
giant Nash. Yeah,
yeah. The
yeah,
shield is amazing. Just that big tongue hanging out. That that had me buckled when I saw it. But I think the whole model, the paint job's fantastic. First of all, props to whoever in the heavy metal teams knocked that one out. But yeah, I'll be really. I like this new direction for the orcs or the orcs or whatever war clan they belong to now. The
yeah.
Krill boys.
Cool boys. Yeah, no, they do look really nice, and some of the like the crossbow guys, but also that giant crossbow. Like they
Yeah.
do look awesome. They're very Lord of the Rings style.
Yes. Yeah.
It definitely. I mean, a few of us were on Discord while we watched the reveal, and we all went, "This looks very Lord of the Ringsy," but we're hoping that someone does a paint job that matches that kind of style.
Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, if you think back to sort of 2001, 2003, when New Line Cinema and GW first did that joint venture for Lord of the Rings, there was such heavy like non-compete. You cannot cross the aesthetic and so on.
yes.
I hope what we're seeing now is a chance to actually take all that hard work they've done in the Lord of the Rings side, and start to let it influence the fantasy side of the
100%.
Warhammer.
Yeah, it's that big Troggoth as well with the orc.
Yes.
Like, it's like,
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm hoping we see some of these armies in the kind of coming months down in Common Ground games because I can't wait. I mean, I'm redoing a Stormcast. Well, doing a new Stormcast chamber. So yeah, that new box set I can't wait. But I expect I'll probably pick up some orcs at some point just to paint up because, like I said, they're so full of character. I don't think there was a single model there that I went, ugh, I don't like that. They're just all great, but
Do you not feel like this is a chance for them to finally throw, not to throw off the shackles of eighth edition or the old, the old world as it was, but with Warhammer coming out in the far future, going back and revisiting that, it's almost like they finally had a chance to say, right, this is us diversion completely now. We've established all this, we've established this lore, the background, and this is us starting to stretch our muscles now and showing exactly what we can do with the lore and the visuals and the artwork, and then just and show you what we can do now with the various armies on the kind of archetypal, tropes of fantasy. The orcs and the shining shining golden warriors. But this is what we can do with it now.
without a shadow of a doubt, like I think, like you said, you've seen it with the new orcs, but I think they've talked about like the cities of Sigmar are going to get like a lot more focus in AOS for it.
Yeah.
And I hope that like kind of, I mean, me and Martin have chatted about it in the past and previous episodes that Cities of Sigmar book is amazing, but it is almost like a final kind of thanks for the memories from the old 8th
Exactly.
edition fantasy models.
Yeah.
It's like
Tip of the hat.
yeah, like the free guild models, they just don't fit into the aesthetic of AOS anymore.
Nah.
So bring out some new cities book, even if it's a specific city that they focus on, but like actual new models, like full human range will be really nice. And
You go and pull a picture up of a Krill boy and put him next to a 8th edition or a 6th edition orc, the old static pose,
yeah,
and tell me that isn't progress.
definitely. No, it's fun times ahead. I quite like the rules, like they tease for the new monsters, new monster rules for the charge phase, and all the different things that they can do.
Do you think that accounts for the points on some of the gods?
I think so, yeah. It probably makes sense. I mean, they kind of focused on Kragnos when they were talking about it, and yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I'd like his War Scroll anyway, but yeah, I think some of the newer things he does, people go, that'll be why that he's gone up, and that's why Ilariel's gone up, and things like that. It will be interesting to see kind of going forward for the new GHB what actually that means for the rest of the factions with monsters and points, and whether they get significant increases as well. Otherwise, we're going to be seeing kind of those up at the 700 points, and then you've got Terrorgeist at what 390 or whatever it is.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's almost like, I don't know if you've ever played World of Warcraft or anything like that, but it's almost like that new expansion crunch.
Yes.
It's like the numbers have got so big that the developers have taken the decision, right, we're going to crunch this down a bit, make it a bit more rational, so these numbers can start to make a bit more sense. So I think with the shrinking of the tables and the kind of pointers that we're seeing with some of the monsters that across the board, we're going to see some changes. Is that a good thing? I think so. It'll be easier to get armies on table. If it's less models to paint, all the better. I say. I struggle to paint as it is, so if I need to paint less, all the better.
No, definitely. It's definitely exciting. I mean, I'm just looking forward to doing a Stormstrike Chariot list.
Oh, yes. I cannot wait to see that.
Like, I'm hoping that there's going to be some sort of like bigger hero on a big chariot that can kind of lead them.
I'm sure you can convert it if not.
Oh, 100%, yeah. When I saw that, I was like, oh my god, I want that. No, it's definitely going to be an exciting few months ahead and an expensive few months ahead.
Yeah. But it's not like we haven't been doing much for the last 14 months, and we've got
exactly. Yeah, it's
some extra cash then.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's our reward. I think I say
Exactly.
this every time I talk about AOS 3. It's like our reward for being stuck indoors for the last 14 months. It's like, here's a new version. Just go and enjoy it.
Exactly. Crazy. Do what you want to do. Just explore everything, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it's exactly what we need. 9th edition seems to have went well for 40k.
Yes.
Let's hope that translates as well just for AOS 3.
Yeah, 100%. So it should be good. Hopefully, are you at Lost in the Damned in July?
Oh, I think I'm first reserve. I think I was a wee bit. I was a first paid reserve. That's how keen I was. But I think I just missed out. So I'm hopeful that I'm there.
Sure, someone will drop out. We normally get a handful of drops out.
I don't know. First tournament after lockdown. I think everyone's a hard lock in.
Yeah, like there's a few of us going to Battle Bunker on June the 12th. I think it is.
That's right. You slipped that in, and all of a sudden there seemed to be a mass exodus from Scotland heading down.
Suddenly, like, everyone's turning up and everyone's going, I'm taking KO. I was like, I'm just going to take something stupid then. I only want to just play free fun games and just actually enjoy rolling some dice for the end of AOS 2.
Seen some old faces.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be playing against loads of ships all day. So.
Teleporting all over the place. Yeah, it's not going to be a good day, is it?
But no, hopefully I'll see you in July. But thank you ever so much for coming onto the show. It's been greatly appreciated.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
If they do want to catch you, are you on Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, so you can get me at Workshy88, and I'm also on Instagram, fledgling Instagram, as Dude Where's My Titan.
Excellent. And I am at Tales of Wargames on Twitter and Instagram, and obviously we've got the YouTube channel as well. But Andy, thank you ever so much once again for coming onto the show. I will probably chat to you at some point in the near future, and very good luck in the Six Nations in November.
Thanks again.
Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.